Welcome to Global Health and Wellness Practitioners YouTube channel, where we're giving exposure and bringing together great practitioners while educating and promoting comprehensive health and wellness globally. Today we're having an open conversation with Dr. Adhi Two Owls. She's a global shaman and has lots of information to share with us. So welcome, Adhi, to our little show here. If you would start, please, with telling us a little bit about your story.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Stephanie. First off, tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up in Connecticut. I'm, a nutmegger. I grew up on the shoreline, West Haven, Connecticut. Pretty normal garden variety, Catholic, dysfunctional family. But I just, inside of me, I always felt connected to nature. I always felt connected to, the what I would call the greater things. I didn't know what they were when I was younger, but I just knew there was something more than my little sort of existence in Connecticut. And I basically I love art and painting and drawing and sculpture, and from a very early age I had a very strong affinity to it. And eventually I went to the Educational Center for the Arts in New Haven, studied painting there, and from there I went to the Kansas City Art Institute, where I studied painting and then transitioned into sculpture. And at that time in 1982, that was the best art school you could get into in the country to study painting art. So it was one of 640 brilliant young minds in the creative world back then. And then, I think one of the things about art is it begins to work on things you never thought it would. So people think, oh, you're just drawing a picture, you're doing this, but it actually affects your brain. It affects your spiritual awareness, your awareness of your environment, your awareness of yourself. It makes you question lots of things, because art is a real sort of self-exploratory process. And to create, you have to kind of go through this process. And at some point I started having these experiences when I was painting and drawing, things like that, but nobody could really explain to me what was going on. Because we were all talking about critiquing things and doing all this other stuff. So the spiritual aspect of art never really clicked. So, but then I also kind of got a good look at what the art world was about. And I said, I don't think I could survive that, So I kind of walked away from my creative process. And for a long time, almost 10 years, I didn't make art. I just kind of went crazy, because I think that's what happens in your 20s when you're given a gift. And then you make a semi lucid choice about something, and then your whole world falls apart. So for most of my 20s, it was kind of a train wreck. And then I had my Saturn return. I was living in the Midwest. I'd been living out there since I went to school, and I came back east to Connecticut to figure out why I was here on the planet. And that began my journey as a shaman and healer and artist. Things like I had to heal myself first. That's where we always have to start, is the self. And, I came back home, and one of the things I remember was hearing the sound of the ocean, Long Island Sound, and how it made me cry, because it's like that sound of the waves. And still to this day, like, being away from the ocean always just makes me feel like I'm missing something. But around the ocean, I feel like I'm around the Great Mother. I feel like I'm being nourished, healed by it. So I spent a lot of time healing myself. I was a 2-pack-a-day smoker back then. And I just, I had to quit smoking, and I had to learn how to eat healthy, and I had to learn how to reclaim my sense of self, and how to have healthy boundaries, like all the human things we have to learn, all the nuts and bolts of being it, and from there I began to meet teachers, and I began to study what I call shamanism. Is it a Native American tradition? Not really. It's a tradition about how we connect to the world around us, how we understand ordinary, non-ordinary reality. And this is the instrument, not this particular instrument, but this is the instrument that got me in there, the rattle. My first teacher had me make one of these. And if you had asked me back then, if I thought I'd still be working with this instrument and that I would still be making them, I would have told you were out of your mind. But I have to say, I am constantly amazed at what this does and how it transforms my life and other people's. But that was the doorway back into my creative process. and back into sort of understanding like the gift I was given. And it's had its peaks and valleys. I can't say my life has been a straight line. I don't think anybody's is. And if you're really wanting to be authentic, you come up against all kinds of challenges, the internal challenges and also the external challenges. You know, walking in your truth is hard. I think there's a lot of people want to say it's easy or blissful, or once you've stepped in the stream, you get carried. Yeah, there are rocks in the stream. They don't tell you about that. And, you know, you lose your paddle. Then there's these, you know, rapids. But that's how it works. You know, that's what life is all about. You know, and so I've had a lot of different teachers. I didn't just have one teacher. And then I moved to North Carolina to studied on there with a couple of teachers. I moved to Pennsylvania and lived there for a while. I lived in Vermont for a while. Moved back to Connecticut. In 2013, I got my PhD in therapeutic counseling and in philosophy based on my research in how indigenous healing methods have a positive effect on mental health and physical health. You know, and what's really interesting is all the research I did back there in 2013. If I were to do it again, it would be totally different because what we know about the brain and the body and the microbiome and all of that stuff totally changes the research. Like, so I feel like I have to kind of almost redo everything from that period of time. But it gave me a good foundation for the work I do now.
And like you said, you learn every day, so you're probably learning all those things.
Well, I have a really voraciously curious mind. Since I was little, I've always just want to know, you know, and yeah, and I think I have this creative sensibility, but I also am a real science geek. I'm a real science nerd. Like I want to know how the universe works, you know, and so I've read like Penrose and Feynman, and all of you know uh, all of the major physicists of the 20th century, 21st century. So I'm constantly trying to understand how it works. And what I find really fascinating is how our imagination and science and art and even spirituality, how they're using different language, but really we're all trying to understand the same cosmic cosmology of who we are and why we're here. Shamanism, for example, is as diverse as the geography of this planet. Every place that we know that shamanism is practiced is different. And that's based on the people in that place and their relationship to the planet and the world around them and how they want to live together in community and with their environments and the ecology of the world around them. So, I guess kind of Renaissance. You could say I'm sort of a Renaissance person. Sense of like, understanding everything and studying things.
I like what you said today in our conversation about how progress is uncomfortable and messy. And it kind of feels like that's a pretty good topic because of right now how things are.
Absolutely. I think that's the right. I mean, I think we're in a really messy place right now with who we are and how we identify ourselves and who we think we are. And progress really isn't about being easy. I think that's kind of you know if it's not being shook up, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, there's no growth. I mean, I think that the idea that we should be in harmony and bliss is great, but when things are in harmony and bliss, there's nothing to make change. Everything just stays the same. And it's these challenges, it's like, we live in a universe, however we want to define our universe, where there's good things and there's bad things, and we have an opportunity to make the bad things smaller and the good things bigger, and how we live our lives, and the choices that we make. And I think we're at that point right now where we get to kind of look at the things that aren't so great and maybe resolve them and make them smaller so we can make the good things bigger, expand out more, to conclude more, and to help more people.
And it's just coming to me too that it's almost like the breaking of our identities is one of
Mhm.
the hardest challenges, I think, and the most uncomfortable things. And
Mhm.
that's probably
Mhm.
what's going on a lot too.
Mhm. Well, and I think part of that is happening because, and this is like some of the big stuff, I mean, that nobody wants to talk about. Our planet obviously is going through a climate evolution. Okay? We don't live separate from our planet. We are part of the ecology of our planet. Um, and the scary truth is everything we know about the world and how it's been divided into countries and nationalities and different groups of people, whatever, however we want to carve it up, that's going to be meaningless as the climate it continues to evolve in the direction it's evolving. Because people are going to migrate, countries are going to no longer have any kind of, you know, you can't build a wall around you. I mean, really, literally, if there's water there and people need water, people are going to gravitate towards the resources that they need. So we're in a place of incredible change on a scale larger than I think we've ever could have imagined. Um, uh, yeah, what, 7.5 billion people, I think, on the planet? I'm counting. Um,
Now, I
so
don't,
yeah, but but we have to remember we do have history to look at, so we can sort of say like every time a successful civilization has risen up and it reaches a point where population, resources, garbage and sewer, and water become an issue. And so that's why we see like, different civilizations rise and fall. They didn't just sort of disappear into mist. I think that's the romantic idea. Most of the time they just didn't know what to do with the amount of people they had, the amount of resources, and how to deal with the waste of that the size of the civilization. So, disease or dispersion or whatever happened. And a lot of them, disappeared. And we have the relics of them in their architecture and art and things like that. But we're at the same place. I mean, we're talking about the same things. They probably were talking about water and food and sewer and waste and the byproduct of our industry. All the same things, except it's just on a grand scale, just mind-blowingly large. And I think that's the place we're at right now. And it is, like you said, it's destroying. It's in the process of destroying our identity and our sense of self and who we are. Um, and then, but then there's this. It's my brain. This is my brain. Um, what is it? So we think about like an initiation. What is an initiation is being confronted by our mortality. So, we face death, and every tradition has some kind of initiatory process, and that's basically what it is. And the part about initiation is that when you are initiated, you are no longer what you were, and now you're moving forward as a different person. And I think as a collective, as a human species, to a greater or lesser degree, depending upon where you are on the planet, we are going through a huge evolutionary species. We're being confronted with our mortality. We're being confronted with the consequences of our actions. We're confronted by all the things that brought us here in a way that's making us make that choice to live or to die. You know, and that's, I think, the big ethical decision inside of us. Right? Like, as an individual, we're making those decisions, as a society and as a world, we're making. So interesting times ahead.